The 2009 Callaway X Forged iron. This is one of my old sets, and I felt today we should come out and review this set of irons. Let's see how they perform for me on the golf course. Going to give you some numbers, going to tell you what they're all about and why are we doing a second-hand golf club review. So what are we doing out here and why are we reviewing a second-hand set of golf clubs? Well, the second-hand market is booming, certainly is in the UK, with huge stores opening up that buy your old clubs for cash. Gives you an opportunity to trade in your old golf clubs to purchase the new stuff. Well, recently I've done some reviews on some new products, and the feedback I get from lots of people is that they're kind of a bit bored of brand new equipment all the time being released by these companies. Like every year it seems like there's this new tech and this club's going to make it go that much further and this wedge is going to spin it this much more. Well, lots of you are looking at the second-hand market, and I was really interested to get some feedback from this video as to, are you interested in a series, let's say, of some second-hand products? And what I would do is, let's say, review that product, give you my kind of feedback on it, talk about some of the specs, give you some numbers, but also go online and have a little look at exactly what it would cost for you to get going with a set of irons, set of second-hand irons. Now, when I was an amateur golfer, Callaway was my kind of go-to set of irons. I did bounce around between kind of Cobras and Callaways, but I had the old X16, and then when I turned professional, I kind of got myself into the forged range. There was a previous generation before this one, but in 2009, I went up to Callaway, got completely fitted for these irons. A really kind of traditional lofted set of irons, and when I say traditional I mean kind of like the old lofts. 35 degrees of loft in the 7-iron and then kind of working up from there, so 31 degrees of loft in the 6-iron. I mean the 5-iron is 27 degrees of loft, which actually in modern tech there's actually 7-irons that are 27 and 28 degrees of loft now, so very traditional in that front. And if you think about it, back in the day, if you had 150 yards, you know, a lot of people were, well, a lot of good players were hitting 7-irons. And look at the setup that I've got in my bag. All right, I've put in a Vokey 56-degree wedge, but this is kind of like the standard set that you would kind of set yourself up with. 3-iron through to pitch and wedge in your set, and then you'd probably put a sand wedge in there at 56 degrees. I mean, it doesn't really actually get any more traditional than that kind of setup, really, but lofts dictate that. As time's moved on, lofts have really decreased because there's this struggle amongst the manufacturers to try and create a 7-iron that goes 170 yards, 175 yards for your kind of average golfer out there. And with a set of irons like this, they weren't necessarily at that particular time looking for distance. They were all about control. And this set of irons in particular, they were kind of like more of your better player irons, should we say. Those players that are moving away from, let's say, a set of blades into something with a little bit more cavity back. But this was kind of not the start of all the cavity back stuff, but it was certainly in that arena of focusing on precision rather than distance. 156. Now I've got to think about that. At 156, you know, these lofts are probably 2 degrees weaker than, let's say, my current set of irons. I'm coming off a slight upslope here, which is going to add loft to the club again. And obviously I'm coming uphill, which is going to add a couple of extra yards. It's probably 5 more yards on top of that. So I'm at 160 yards, let's say, to the flag, and then got to add a little bit more because of the clubs and this particular lie. So the other thing is it's slightly cold. I'm in a waterproof jacket and it's early morning, so I'm actually going to go with a 5-iron. Oh, it's come out like a rocket. Interesting flight from that though. And the flight I'm talking about there is that I'm getting kind of a low riser. So very kind of old school in some ways, and these are only 2009, so we're only talking 15 years ago, but the ball kind of starts out quite flat and then wants to rise up, which indicates to me that possibly we've got lots of spin coming out of these irons. And again, more traditional lofts, you're going to expect that, but maybe the tech that's moved on in the generations has made it maybe launch a fraction higher and then hold itself on that flight a little bit more. So definitely seeing something slightly different, certainly off the tee box, and then with that particular shot there. Now, I am actually quite happy that I've hit 5-iron there, because I'm still a good 10 or so paces shy of that flag position. So what did I calculate? 160. I mean, that's, for me, I would definitely at this time of day probably be hitting a 6-iron in my set. So they're definitely a club and a half shy of what I would normally be hitting down there. Bit wet on the ground still. Go on, down you go, down you go, down you go. Not bad. Now, visually down by the ball, we're seeing some really good things from this particular iron. I'm seeing quite a bit of real estate when I look down at this club, as in on the face of the club. So from kind of heel to toe, it's quite a big face, which gives us a little bit of confidence that those off-centered strikes might just still be able to get out there a little bit further with that ball speed. When you look on the top rail, this is an interesting one. So, and this is where the generations have really moved on from a visual point of view. Now, it's not the biggest top line in the world, as in it's quite thin. However, it's squashed down, so it's flat on top. In the modern stuff, what you're going to see is actually probably a similar size of top line, but they roll the edges a little bit, or even change the kind of chrome or colouring in it, just to sort of blend it a little bit more into the iron. So I'm seeing lots of kind of square edges with this particular iron, which actually, moving into the modern stuff, I much prefer the modern stuff, let's say, over something like this. Again, very minimal offset that you would expect to see from kind of a cavity back iron for more of a players out there. And then when you look at the back of the club, again, cavity back, but ultimately lots of perimeter weighting, again, just to help move that weight to the outer perimeter, which allows us to get bigger MOI spots, which allows us to have, again, that ball speed up when we do miss-hit it. Again, 9-iron off that mat there. I mean, you expect to possibly get a little bit more spin out of a mat, not getting too much sort of grass between club face and ball, but really kind of revving up. I know there's a little bit of breeze now, but really revving up on me. But then we look at the bottom of the club and we talk about things like turf interaction. And to be honest with you, turf interaction is kind of like, it's subject to kind of pretty much where you play. Because when you play on a lot of parkland courses, especially this time of year, well, you don't sense it quite as much as what you would do, let's say, on a links golf course where it's a little bit firmer underfoot. My first experience of understanding turf interaction was when I was kind of on a tour range where it's compact really nicely, cut beautifully. It's like literally like hitting off a green, and you really get the sense of how the club is working in and out of the turf. And that's all to do with the soul of the club. And you know, you look at the tech specs of all the modern clubs. Over the years, you can see that they've kind of worn off the front edge a little bit to allow that club to work in quite nicely, but also come out of the turf easily. Again, I've played some shots here today with all the irons through the set, and I'm not sensing a great deal of difference on turf interaction side of it. So all in all, so far, so good. Just getting maybe just a little bit too much spin out on the golf course, which, can you actually have too much spin? It was probably 2009 when I actually last hit a 3-iron, an actual traditional 3-iron, into a par 3. I'm not sure how well it went then, but that's gone straight at it. Be the right number. Oh, delightful. Now, I don't know if you heard from that shot that I just hit in there with that 3-iron, that kind of click off the club face. Soft. I mean, these are forged irons, so you expect them to feel a little bit soft, but actually that was kind of bladey soft. And I don't know, again, if that's anything to do with the lofts of the clubs being slightly more loft, giving us that sense of a softer impact. I don't know, more of a brushing off the face maybe. But actually, from a feel point of view, I've never felt anything. Well, I maybe tested a set of PXGs once, which were pretty damn soft. I know it's a 3-iron, and I know it's 175 yards to that flag, but it's still short, isn't it? These irons are not doing, well, they're not doing a lot for my ego. Get online, that's right, tracker. Right online. Another club that's really important to me is the pitching wedge in the set. I'm somebody that likes to use a pitching wedge from the set. Well, as long as it gives me the spinning control that I'm looking for. And I'm also looking for something that is maybe a slightly smaller in its profile. I like to see those wedges kind of really blend nicely into, let's say, my Vokey wedges that I'd be using right now. And what you'll see when you always pick up kind of a more traditional bladed or cavity back iron, they're going to think about that quite a lot. And for this particular iron, especially the pitching wedge in this set, we're getting a beautiful blend as it gets a little bit smaller running into this pitching wedge, which again allows me to be able to blend really nicely with my specialist wedges. And I always suggest whenever you're testing a set of irons, and I know it's a little bit more difficult with a second-hand set because actually you might purchase them online, but sometimes you can pick them up in the pro shop and take them out. Always grab a hold of the pitching wedge and just have a couple of chips around the greens with it, because what you're trying to get the sense of is, can you get any feel from this pitching wedge? How does it feel off the club face? Is it feeling kind of dead? Is it feeling kind of springy off the face? Again, this is a really important club when it comes to scoring a little bit better. Now, a big area for me when it comes to the spin that we're going to generate from golf clubs is how much control can we get from shots that have made their way just off the fairway into the kind of rough or semi-rough. Really important to start off with a good amount of spin from your irons. If you can start off with a good amount of spin, it's going to help with that control of the golf ball when you get out here on the golf course. Remember, whenever you get wet conditions between club face and ball, you're always going to lose spin. Whenever you get grass caught between club face and ball, you're going to lose spin. And ultimately what you're going to get? You're going to get flyers. And I always think if you go beyond the pin and go short-sided, you're going to be in a position where you're going to be really tricky to get up and down. Remember, the golf course kind of ends behind the green. And I've got myself into about 160, 155, 160 yards to that flag. And I'm going with a 6-iron. And it will be interesting to look at the spin numbers from these clubs in just a moment. But how much control can I actually get from this club? And you can feel a flyer if it comes off the club face. But that actually is coming out, not revving quite like I'm seeing out on the golf course with other shots, but it's coming out with a nice trajectory, one of which I feel like I've got some control with it. And look at the result of these two shots that I've hit into this green. Those two shots with a 6-iron out of that rough condition, actually not the same lies, but ultimately still getting the control. And look at where we've ended up, within like 4 feet of each other, but also the fact that they're within 6 inches of each other from kind of front to back. That is what you call controlling your ball flight out of these rough conditions, which I'm sorry to say is what we're losing a little bit in this modern tech. Really interesting numbers that I'm getting from these irons. Pitching wedge, spin-wise, 9,300 revs, going 118 yards on an average. That's probably about 5-6 yards down from what I would see, let's say, from my standard kind of pitching wedge in the current set. But remember, this is 47 degrees of loft in this pitching wedge. Then I've got my 7-iron. Spin, though, 6,976 revs. Now, a good sort of base or gauge, should we say, when looking at kind of more traditional lofted clubs is look at the bottom of the number, times that by 1,000, and then give or take 500 revs either side. Pretty much gets you to your kind of number. So anything between 6,500 and 7,500 would be about right with this particular setup. So nearly 7,000 revs, which is, as I said, more spin than I would get with my own set. I would be probably between 6,200 and 6,500 with my current 7-iron. 150 yards. I said at the beginning of the video, how far do you get 7-iron? 150 yards. That's how far it's carrying. Then we go up to the 5-iron, 5,490 spin, going 172 yards. And then we go up to the 3-iron, which is getting around 4,000 spin, just over, and is going 193 yards. So again, if I look at that 5-iron, I would say that that's closer to my current 6-iron. And then if I look at the 3-iron, I would say that's pretty much spot on for my current 4-irons. But with all those numbers now given to you and how these clubs are kind of performing for me, let's have a little look at exactly what these type of clubs would cost you in the current market online. And just scrolling through here, a couple of the big online stores that do the trade-in golf clubs for cash. I've got here £169.99, just over £20 per iron for this particular set. Haven't been able to find the 2009 model with Golf Bidder. However, have found the 2013 model, so the next generation probably on from these,
at £242.99. And then if you go over to Marketplace, you can pick them up for around £150 per set. Again, 3 or 4 iron to wedge, depending on what you're looking for. And I actually found a couple of left-handed sets. Now remember, these irons came in when they first came out onto the market at just under £100 per iron. So a set of irons, 3 iron to wedge, around that sort of £799, £800 mark. Now, when it comes to these irons, remember, these are designs for players that are going to be looking for a control. And when I looked at my numbers there, getting a lot of spin out on the golf course, there's a couple of things that you could do to be able to deal with that. You could obviously de-loft the club slightly. De-lofting the club unfortunately makes it a little bit more offset, which is a bit of a no-no for me, and it also starts playing around with that sole of the club. But actually, you could play around with golf balls. I was just thinking of maybe something like, even like the Titleist AVX ball, which is a lower spinning model. That might just get it out there just a little bit further and actually take a little bit of that spin off. So it'd be interesting to see how that performed for that. But I'd like to hear down in the comments, are you somebody in the market looking for a second-hand set? What do you think of this video and this particular series? I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and go and check out these particular irons and see if they might actually work for your game.